All right, everyone, welcome to part 3 of the GM 4L80E automatic transmission rebuild. At this point, we're on the forward clutch assemble as we start part 3 here. They talk about a number of special tools, the J21362-1 and the J38732-1 for installing this bonded piston back inside of this 602 piece here. The housing assembly. Now, we're not going to be using any of these Kentmore tools. We're going to be using an aftermarket tool, but first I'm going to show you something about our forward clutch. All right, so here's our original forward clutch. This is one of the areas that we had that was a damage item. And so during the cleaning and inspection, and even during the video editing, we didn't really catch this in the disassembly until the editing stage. But what we had was we have this bushing that was stuck on this other piece here, like that, and had spun out from the inside of this. I don't make oversized bushings for these, and so this entire part was shot because of that problem. And in fact, when we get to the next stage with this guy, just because of all this burning and discoloration, we're going to go ahead and replace this entire unit as well. So this gets replaced with a 19125985, which is a brand new GM forward clutch assembly. This is one of those examples where I've said in some of the earlier videos that the bushings would be pre-installed on these sort of things. Now she's got some kind of a coating of like some kind of anti-corrosion material. We're going to wipe all that off before we get too far into it, but I did want to show you that damage item and why we won't be reusing this particular part. And what we're going to end up doing to assemble our pieces here. So inside this piece, this particular inner seal is also press fit onto the unit. It was the same for the old one as well. GM does not service these. So if you have some kind of problem with this part, again, the whole clutch has to be replaced. So the fact that we got the bearing problem means we get a new one of these as well. Our original piston 606, these bonded pistons, like I've said before in the earlier videos, they can be reused. There's nothing wrong with this one per se, other than having about 300,000 miles on it. Since we got a new one of these and we got that kind of mileage, we're just going to go ahead and replace it with a 2420 4957. And so when they say bonded, that's why these videos are only for 97 and up that use this type of bonded piston. So what we're going to do now is we're going to spritz everything up with Dexron 6 and get it ready to put together. So you guys just hold on momentarily and we'll come back when we're all set. All right, we've got everything lubed up here. We're going to be using this centerpiece from BET Performance for this piece. And then what we're going to be doing instead of those other tools is we're just going to be using a lip wizard to help get this guy on in the lower area. This is very similar to some of the other ones I've shown you I've done. I'm just going to get a set of lubrication going here. We'll take a couple of passes. But this tool is a lot cheaper than the Kentmore ones. And it's just as good. It just takes a little longer. But we'll know when we're done when she fully seats. And usually with this, it's just going to get stuck in like one area. And you'll finally, like here, this is like we're coming up on an area that's sticking. Because if the lip wizard can't fit in there, then it's not going to seat. But having this little film of Dexron is what helps ease it in as we go around. It squeezes a little bit more of that in with each pass. At that point, we're pretty much settled in here. Yep. Once you can feel it bottom out there, you know you're done. But I like to go around again. You'll feel it kind of bounce up on you. And that's a good sign that nothing's bent over. All right. What's next? Next up, they want us to install the 607 clutch spring, and they want us to put a 608 retainer in, very similar to the other clutch. Let's just grab those pieces and get our spring compressor, and let's get that done. All right, just compress him down until we can see the groove. There we go. We're going to put a 862-3105 in there. It's going to take the place of our original 608 part. And very similar to what we've done on some of these other clutches. Just hold it in the back so it doesn't get away from you. And then just like these other clutches, the problem you've got is these little nubs. They get in the way of properly seating these guys. So have to be careful as you push them down. You get past that. Unfortunately, haven't found a really good way rather than what I'm doing right now, where you just have to manually kind of work it in. And that's mostly because, you know, we're using this aftermarket spring compressor, so we don't have the clearance that you'd have if you were using the Kent Moore one. Be able to get in here easier. So that's all I'm going to do, guys. I'm just going to use the top of my tool. Just going to go around and keep working this around. We'll come back in when we get this fully seated. All right. We just had to give it a little bit more compression. Gave us the clearance we needed to pop the back and that last side in. I'm just always cautious about not wanting to put too much pressure on these guys, because you can easily bend these spring assemblies. All right, what's next? Well, we're going to go do frictions and steels, wave plate, frictions and steels. We got our 615 clutch hub retainer ring, all restored and ready to go on. Let's just go grab these other parts, get our dipping station for our Dexron, because again, with any clutches, you're going to dip them in the ATF before you install them. All right, so first thing we got is the wave plate. So 609, here's our original one, and we're going to replace that again with a 2420 5560. I just treat these like a spring. We don't have to put anything on this one in terms of any kind of Dexron. And then you got your stack of frictions and steels. Now the frictions, we're going to get out of our rebuild kit. And we're going to get 5 new ones of those, which is 2420 2646. We got 5 left from our rebuild kit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And when the time comes, we'll be dipping those in the ATF. Now let's take a look at these. I'll show you a little bit more carnage than we usually see. So when we look at our steels, we can see this steel's okay. You know, it's got some marring, but I probably would have reused it. But these steels are shot. There's heavy scoring on them. So this is an example when GM would tell you you've got to replace the steels. These two heavily scored and burned from that spun bushing problem. Heavily scored, burned, you know, doesn't pass the fingernail test. This one's smooth. It's got some discoloration. Looks fine on this side. It's got some discoloration on this side. I would go ahead and replace it if I got to replace the others. And you can see our clutches are burned down right to the steel. All the friction material on that one is gone. You can see this one is still relatively okay, just for comparison. This clutch is burned out. This clutch is normal wear. This clutch is normal wear. So that's an example of when you usually see me reuse the steels. This is an example when we're not going to reuse the steels. If I had to replace one, I'll end up replacing all of them to keep them all in the relatively same condition. So in this case, we're going to replace all 5. All right, we're going to replace those with AC Delco 8623849. AC Delco 8623849. There's 4 in a pack. So we'll need 5. We'll end up having to open up their second pack here in order to get the 5 that we need. Take one more out of here. Now we're ready to start our little dipping exercise. I'm going to show you something else in the manual though first. All right, let's get these guys out of our way. All right, so as we start stacking these, there's a couple of things they point out, right? So we're going to dip them in the Dextron ATF just like the other clutch. We've already put the wave plate in. We're going to do steel and composite, starting with a steel and then alternating until we get to the top. But we're not going to put the hub and the thrust washer in at this time because we're going to end up having to check all this with what's called a forward clutch piston travel check down here at the bottom. And so we're going to end up taking the turbine shaft, part 502, and we're going to end up putting this in a vise, and we're going to put the assembled piece on top with it, and we're going to get out our dial indicator, and then we're going to apply air, and then we're going to check the operation of this clutch and make sure it moves within this specified range here, right? So the piston travel is 307 to 4.72 millimeter or 0.121 to 186 thousandths, right? And then we'll take it apart again and we'll install these 2 pieces, or these 3 pieces rather, and we'll drop those in. All right, so let's get going on this last piece here. So the orientation on this, just like the other clutch, it doesn't matter, and all we're doing is dipping here, but I am going to make an effort to keep them all in a similar orientation. Right. So just like they say, right, this is just a dip. This stuff is not porous. There's no reason to soak it because there's no way it's going to absorb anything. Let's see, I'm going to try to keep this flat side up on this top area here, right there. Actually, what I wanted to do is I wanted to keep these notches in the same position. So we'll just pay attention to that. I'm pretty sure it doesn't matter, but they were all lined up when I took it out, so we're going to make sure they stay all lined up, putting them back in. All right, one more. It'll let you know if you get it in cockeyed like that because it won't go in. Or at least it won't go in all the way. All right, and now our backing plate. And now our retaining ring. So that was our 616 ring, and we're going to replace that with a AC Delco 8623112. We put this guy on, and then we'll be ready to do that piston travel check. All right. Done. So let's go grab our turbine shaft and head over to the vise. All right, guys, so before we can do that check, though, we're going to need to reassemble the turbine shaft. If you recall, during the disassembly video, we removed the seals that were at the ends here and here, and we're going to need to put those back because otherwise we're not going to have an airtight seal for this test to work as effectively as we need it to. So in the service manual, they talk about a whole host of tools that you need for this. a whole series coming in the J38736 package, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And basically the deal is you got to expand these Teflon seals so that they can fit into these grooves, and then compress them back around so they sit nice and flush. And that's what all of this is about. So all these different tools here. So I'll show you these, but I'm not going to be using these Kent-Moore GM type tools. But I'll scroll down through the instructions here in case you have them, which is great. And you'd be able to follow along with what I'm showing here. All of these different tools that are used to do all of this, right? And then they go on this side here. And then this side here. And then there's this range of tools here, and this set of operations here to do the other end, and then here. Now what we're going to be using is an aftermarket set of tools, something called a ring buddy. And it's just a couple of plastic pieces. This is the resizer, or this is the piece that's going to do the stretching, and this is the piece that's going to do the sizing back to fit, right? So this is for this end, and this larger one, very similar design, is for this end. So here's our original ones, if I can find them here. Right there they are. 501 and 503 that we took off when we did the disassembly. If we look at our rebuild kit, we can kind of see them in here. The two smaller ones would be 501, and the two smaller ones would be 503, and the two larger ones would be 501, and then we can double check those part numbers. So 866, 1893, and 866, 1894. And if we come over to our parts explosion, 503 and 501. 501 is 1894, and 503 is 1893. So those are the correct parts. So pop these out from our rebuild kit. Take our little marker here and just notate that we've used those two pieces from the kit. Now we're going to use Transgel for this to make it go a little easier. This is a thing where you can never have too much lubrication. And unfortunately, the more lubrication you get on it, the harder it is to hold this thing. But to get it going, we're going to kind of slowly squeeze this guy on so that he gets stretched. I'm just going to show you one. You can end up doing the same thing for each one, though. There's two. And the GM tools are doing the same thing. They've just got more pieces and more incremental steps. This is less pieces. Same deal, though. All right, so now this guy's been stretched. Now we're going to bring him all the way down, right to just about the end here. Now we're going to transgel up the end of our shaft. And now this is going to be large enough to slide onto the turbine. Yeah. So we messed it up, but we didn't damage it. We just have to do it over again. Now, just like some of these other tools you've seen me use here, these aftermarket tools, you can save a lot of money, but you have to fiddle around with them a lot more than the GM tool. So let me see if I can get this thing where it doesn't pop off as we slide it on. Well, I want to see if it's maybe sized enough where I can get it on without that tool there, but I don't think so. Don't think so, and I don't want to damage it. So sorry about that, guys, but it's worth it to me to save a few $100 on tools that I'm not going to use that often. Maybe what I'll do is I'll hold it like this. See if that helps me any. I tell you, this is a pisser to get on. I really wish it had a different edge on it that would hold on better. Finally. She's kind of a little cocked there, so I just wanted to make sure that I fix that problem. And then you're going to take the other piece and squeeze it back down to fit into that groove, making sure that it's in that groove all the way before you do so. This has got like a little chamfered end to it to help you with that purpose. Yeah, this part of the job is the part I hate the most, is getting these things in here. See if I can get some of this off my hands, get a better grip on this thing. This one we certainly don't need any lubrication on the outside, just on the inside. There we go. And we're just going to let that sit for a minute and squeeze that down. And then we're going to repeat it for the other one. All right, let this guy sit for about 5 minutes. And boom. There's our sized ring, right? It says it's kind of like sticking out just a hair. I might go ahead and sit it back in here for a few more minutes just to make sure we can get the second one on okay. All right, the larger one's the same process. Lots of lubrication. And then we're going to slowly stretch it. And we're going to let it sit while it's stretching. We're going to go ahead and transgel up the rest of this guy. Just work it down the tool. That'll resize it to fit on the turbine. Just want to go slow so we don't damage it. Don't tear it or anything like that. As it starts to go down, get more of our lubrication down where we haven't lubed it already. All right, similar to what we did on the other one, we're going to have to get it on here. Now, it's not going to go down any further than this. So we're going to have to work it onto the teeth here. There we go. And it's going to get stuck in this snap ring hole. We don't want it to get stuck in there because then it'll want to try to live in there. Yeah. To work him off of here. But yeah, again, guys, you know, using a non-GM tool, just expect to have to fiddle with it some more. See if I can get it past this time. There we go. And I wouldn't use any tools but your fingers so that you don't damage anything. And if she looks like she's not going to go, then we'll work her back off and we'll run her through the resizing tool again, which is what I'm going to do because she's not happy to go down there. So we'll stretch her again and we'll give it another shot. All right, so we'll just keep doing this. I'll bring you guys back when we get it past this snap ring piece. All right, second time she swung past that. Now we're going to work her down. Again, just trying to keep everything nice and lubed up. This one I'm going to go ahead and try to get it into the first home if I can. If she doesn't want to go, then she can stay here. Fine, she'll stay here. And we'll take our resizer. Kind of compress it a little bit with our fingers. Until we're able to get it all the way down. And then just like the ones on the small end, we'll let it sit for a little bit and squeeze that down into the oil ring slot. All right, now that we've got our reconditioned turbine shaft, we can now set the clutch assembly on top of it. We're going to be applying air through this hole here. We're going to put our finger on the other side there. Then what we got up on top is we've got our dial indicator set up. And if we come shoot down with the camera, you can see we're shooting the indicator rod down through the spring assembly so that we can make contact with the top of the piston. Because remember, what we're measuring here is piston travel. We're not trying to measure just the small amount of travel that the clutch pack has. We're trying to measure the larger item, which is the amount of travel that we have on the piston itself. So now we're going to apply 40 psi of air and we're going to see what we get. So about 128, 129, which is well within our specifications. So this assembly is ready to install. But first, we got to take it back to the bench. We're going to open it up, and we're going to put the pieces that are still left to be put inside. All right, so we completed this check, and like we said, our measurement was within specifications. So now we move on to this piece here. So we're going to take the 616 ring off again, and we're going to take off the retainer hub ring that we just put on because they only wanted these pieces on for that test. All right, so we'll set this guy aside. Set him like this. All right, so now what we've got to take is we're going to take part 613, which is the hub, and then we're going to take 614, which is a plastic thrust washer, and 612, which is a bronze thrust washer. And we're going to take those three pieces, so plastic, hub, and bronze, and we're going to set them inside here. So here is 613. All cleaned up and ready to go. And our plastic 614 is being replaced by a GM 862 4781. Fish him out of there. And our 612 bronze thrust washer is going to be replaced by a GM 2424 1413. All right, so what we're going to do with these guys is we're going to, since they're thrust washers, we're going to put a little trans gel on them to hold them together. And also keep them where we want them. And then the plastic one. Probably put more than I wanted on that. Excuse me, the thruster, the bronze one's going to go on first. And we'll take this guy, put the plastic one on top. And now comes the fun part. We're going to have to get it lined up with all of these frictions. And there's not a tool like we had with the direct clutch to line all that up. Sometimes it might be easier to put this in first and then run all these alongside it. But we'll try doing it the way the service manual indicates first. If it's too much trouble, then we'll take everything out and we'll reassemble it with this pre-installed. Two. Yeah, it takes too long. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fish these guys out. We're going to put this in, and then we'll rebuild it around it. All right, so we'll put this guy in first this time. There we go. Then we'll rebuild this like so. And then we won't be fighting with it. And we don't have to redo the test that we just did before because that was just a piston travel test. Doesn't have anything to do with this clutch. Come on, get in there. See, this way you're not fighting with this as much. Well, you're still sometimes fighting with it a little bit. Do get a tool in here, be very gentle with it. You don't want to damage it. Come on, come on, come on, get in there. Not sure why that guy was being stubborn. Last one. There we go. Now we can put this guy back on. Now we can put this guy back on. And now this assembly is done and ready to install. Now when we get it installed and we get it into the transmission, they're going to show here, there's a special tool, a J38858, that they're using to install this in this direction, right? Like this. And then they want you to position 601, which is a bearing assembly, in there as well. So 601, here's our old one here. And we're going to replace that with an 862-8202. But we'll install this after we get this back inside the case. Now, that tool grabs right under the ring gear and holds it like that. Now, I'm not going to use that tool. I consider that an optional tool. If you get your hands cleaned off, you can hold on to this just fine, sit it in there without any special tools. At this point, with the direct clutch in there, it's not such a deep drop into the case. We're getting up near the top where the pump goes. So some of these tools I just view as optional. So let's go ahead and get this guy mounted in the case. All right, guys, we're getting ready to install this forward clutch assembly now. So we don't have a tool like we did to get the frictions on the intermediate clutch lined up to drop this direct clutch in. But now what we're going to do to get this done is we're just going to take a flathead. We're going to run it through the teeth of the frictions inside this direct clutch and just try as best we can to get them all lined up so we can drop the forward clutch assembly in there. So I'm just going to keep going around like this, and we'll bring you back when we're ready to drop it in. All right, so you want to make sure that your plastic thrust washer is still being retained by Transgel here. And these are the teeth that we want to get meshed in with the frictions inside the direct clutch assembly. We got to get these two mated up. So we don't have a particular tool to drop this guy in. We're just going to kind of use our hand. this is going to be definitely a trial and error kind of deal. Now I can feel like we've got it past a couple of them, but we got a bunch more to go. All right, so this is going to be a couple of different tries, guys, because what's happened, as you can see, is we try to put it in. What these guys are going to want to do is they're going to want to get out of alignment again. So you're going to just have to get your straight edge or your screwdriver or whatever tool you're using, line them up again, and give it another go. And we're going to make a couple of attempts at this, and I'm not necessarily going to film them all because this is definitely, in my experience anyway, a real trial and error deal. But we'll try to show you another try here. Yeah, no, so I'm going to have to fiddle with this for a few times, guys. We'll bring you back when we get it further down the way. All right, guys, we're still gradually working this guy on, right? The best thing to do is just to keep turning it around in a clockwise direction while you wiggle it into place. But yeah, it's a pain. It is I'm here to tell you, it's a pain. All right, guys, we finally got this forward seated and installed here. And, you know, just like on the other clutches, there's a couple of ways we can tell we're done, right? We can pick up on this guy, and we do it by sound. We can also take a look inside the bore and see where the splines of the shaft are in relation to coming up on that hub assembly on the other side of the forward. Hopefully the glare is not too bad there, and you can still see. Another thing we can take a look at is we can pan the camera over to the passenger side. There's a little access way here, and we can take a look down right down there, and you can see the seam spacing between the forward and direct. And then if we pan the camera over to the driver's side of the transmission, and where the forward speed sensor is going to go in, we pan in here, we can see the reluctor wheel for the speed sensor. Let's give that a turn there. You can see these guys moving around. And so that can also show you relatively where everything sits when it's in position. So if we come back up on top, got two more things to do here. One, we're going to put our 862-8202 bearing assembly in. Now these GM bearing assemblies, they come painted black on one side and silver on the other. The silver side goes up. I already spritzed this guy with some ATF, but now we got him in here. We'll give him a little more. You can never have too much lubrication on these things. And then the last thing I'm going to show you, and we'll show what this is in the service manual, is a measurement. And to do this measurement, I'm just going to be using an old school machinist ruler that measures out in tenths. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over the top of the forward, and this whole shelf that runs the perimeter where the pump gasket sits, we're just going to take a rough measurement here. Just want to make sure you got it nice and level on the bottom. You just want to see where are you lining up here. And you can get another straight edge to see where you're sitting, but you can see we're right about at 3.9 inches. So let's take a look at the service manual and see why this is significant. All right, so now we've got this forward clutch installed. Just coming back to the manual here real quick for a couple of points. So like I mentioned, that overdrive carrier thrust bearing goes silver side up into the housing in that recessed area I showed you, and that's number 601 that we see in the diagram. And then they also, just to help you even without the paint, they show you the orientation. The other measurement I showed you was an important note here after you get this guy in there and seated to tell if you got it in all the way. They tell you the distance between the top of the speed sensor ring, that would be this notched outer area that I showed you, and the pump gasket surface should be approximately 98 to 99 millimeters, or 3.85 to 3.89 inches. That's why I was showing you it's sitting right around 3.9 inches on a ruler. By eye, you know, that's probably 3.89. You can always get in there with another type of measuring device that's more precise, but I'm confident from the sound and the other tests we showed you that we're done with this step, so let's move on to the fourth. Assembling. So there's a series of special tools you need for this guy. The J38731 series, 1, 2, and 3, and then a 38882 assembly adapter, and then again a 327 clutch spring compressor. Now we're not going to be using most of these tools. We will use the spring adapter, but everything else we're going to use aftermarket tools. So we're going to go grab our 528 piece. So this is an aluminum piece, all cleaned up and restored. So this is our 4th clutch piston. And then we're going to go grab 529, which is our 4th clutch housing. Again, all cleaned up and restored. And this one is also aluminum. All right. And what we're going to identify are the seals we took off. So from 528, we removed seal 527. And then 529, we removed seal 531. And they're telling you to make sure when you install the new ones, the direction of the lips here, like you see in the illustration. So at the base of 528, we want to have that lip seal pointing up like this. And then the one that's going to go in this groove along the inside of 529, we want to have that lip facing in this direction, just like you see in the illustration right here. So we're going to go into our rebuild kit bag, and we're going to look for 2420 2357 and 2420 2358. And again, we can find those parts just by going over to our parts explosion and looking at our numbers, 527 being the 2358 and 531 being the 2357. So it should be these two guys here, because they're the only two left in there of reasonable size. I'm going to mark that we've used them, 5.7 and 5.8. And these look very similar, so we don't want to get them confused. So as we can see here, there's the lip on this one, right on the outside. If we zoom in. And then the other seal, if we look at this guy, there's the lip right there. So now we just got to go figure out which is which. Well, that's very easy, right? Because the lip is on the outside of 527, and the lip is on the inside of 531. That's how you can tell the difference visually. And we can see that just by looking at our old one here, 531. The lip is on the inside diameter. 527, the lip is on the outside diameter. So with that simple check, we know that this is 527 and this is 531. So let's go ahead and get those installed. Now, this is a fairly large seal, so it would take a lot of ATF to lubricate it up. When they talk about installing this, for whatever reason, they don't mention using any ATF to lubricate these seals like they've done in all the other pistons that we've done. But we're going to go ahead and lube these guys up anyway, because it's just a general good idea to do that. So what I'm going to use is I'm going to lube them up with some trans gel, because for something large like this, this will be more efficient time-wise for us, less messy than using the ATF. Now we're just going to put a little bit on just so it doesn't go in dry first. Right, so again, familiarize yourself with the square end that's going to go into the piston and the lip end on the outside edge. And then we're going to run this guy in. All right. So just like we want to see, the lip is facing in the up direction. Right, so that's what we want to see on this guy. Now, same thing on this one. So lube this guy up here. Again, just so it's not going in dry. We're going to put some more on when we start using these tools, but I want to show you these tools that we're going to be using first. All right, so we're going to put 531 in here. Into our housing. And just like the illustration showed, we want to make sure that the lip seal is facing down. Just got a little piece here that's not wanting to cooperate. All right, so now we got everything seated. And so from this orientation, the lip seal should be facing down. So if we flip it up, we can see that that is the case. So there's our lip seal. All right. So now we've got those done. It's time for these tools. So like I said, I'm not going to be using the Kentmore OEM tools, but I'll show you the 3 steps. Then we'll go back and I'll show you the aftermarket tools. They're similar, but they're not the same. So the 78-731 would go inside the top of 529, and the 38-731-2, the 528 would go on the inside of that. Now, this is very similar, these aftermarket tools. These tools from Kentmore are plastic, and the OEM tool, the aftermarket tools I'm going to be using are made of steel. There's still 3 pieces involved, but they're not quite the same, and of course they're not the OEM. All right, so very similarly, this guy is going to go in here, just like we see 731-1 is going to go on the top. So that small steel tool is going to be that one, and then this larger indented ring with a lip on the bottom is going to be a knockoff of J38-731-2. So we're going to lube this guy up. And we're going to work him into the top of 529 to protect that seal. So now we're going to grease this guy up with some trans gel. Then we're going to take our tool. We've already lubed up the tool. And we're going to slide this guy in past our lip seal to protect it. As long as we get it in evenly, it should just rotate right around and protect our seal. Just going to transgel up our 527 piece. All the way around on the tool side. And then this guy is going to go in like this. Just got to get him centered. It's kind of like a bushing. See, it goes in cocked, he won't go in properly. There he goes. All right, so now that guy's seated in the tool. And then that piece is going to go on this base. And it's going to sit right at the bottom of the piston, right like that. All right. Now we're just going to put a little bit more lubrication on as we bring the 2 halves together. We'll pick up this piece and we'll slide it on top. Actually, we want to do a little bit around this chamfered part of the tool as well, and around the bottom part of the housing. Right around here. All right. Got to get him on straight. All right, so now we've gotten the first step. Got those two pieces together. Now we got to bring the piston and the housing together. This is what the tool's primary job in life is. All right, so with our aftermarket tool, we've done the equivalent of placing the 38731-2 and the piston 528 onto the J38731-3. Which is a base. And then the last step is they want you to gently push down on the fourth clutch housing, 529, until the fourth clutch piston, 528, is through the fourth clutch housing, exposing the retaining ring groove. And then you can remove the tools. All right, so basically what that means is they want us to push this guy down until this piece comes up. So what we should start to see, for example, is we should start to see the lip seal here make its way into the next piece of the tool, assuming we got enough lubrication to do that. I should move it a little bit. This is another one of those things where you just want to go slowly, very slowly. We don't want to have this seal get damaged. It's kind of hard to grab it. She's starting to move. It's got a little bit more. We just have to bottom it on the tool and we're done. I think we've done that. Let's see if the groove is showing. It is. Success. So now we're ready for the next step. All right, next step is to put the retainer ring and the spring assembly on. So they're going to show the J23327 mousetrap type tool pushing down on a 38882. We're going to be using our aftermarket compressor like we usually do. But we are going to use the 38882 because it's just the easiest way to deal with this type of spring. So here's our 532 spring assembly. Lay that guy right on there. And then we're going to be replacing 533, which is the retaining ring, with an AC Delco 866-1578. Go ahead and lay that guy right there. Get our snap ring pliers. Have them handy. Go ahead and position. So the way this guy works is he's got little nubs that can fit into any one of the holes on the top. So I'm going to sit him like that. So we can spread out the compression force accordingly. Now, hold on a second, guys. I'm going to have to put something underneath here because this base that this piece is sitting in is a little bit longer than our spring compressor. All right, so we got a small piece of wood in here to account for the size of this particular clutch assembly inside of our aftermarket compressor. So now we should be able to get this to push down evenly. And we're just going to push it down until we can see the groove, right? So we're looking to see the groove all the way around. Now the challenge we've got with this one, if you remember from the disassembly video, is you've got these little nubs here that are going to be fighting with us in order to get the ring in. And so we got to kind of balance the amount of compression we do not to damage the spring to get those nubs below where the ring has to sit. So let's see if I can get this in by hand, actually, most of the way. So that then we're just working on the nub problem. All right, so I'm going to squeeze this down just a little bit more. I think I need to have a little tool here, little pocket pry bar tool. Just stuck getting into the groove here for some reason. There he goes. All right. And now on this side, same thing. Just give it a little push with your hand. And now she's fully seated. You can pull her out. Move this. And now we've got that assembly done. We can go ahead and extract her from the last piece of the tool. All this stuff is a real tight fit, guys. And because it's aluminum, I try to be really gentle with it. She's hung up somewhere here. I got a little plastic hammer here that I can use to give a little bit of persuasion. There we go. All right, so now we are ready to move on to the next step. All right, it's dipping time, folks. So we're going to install the fourth clutch plates 525 and 26 in an alternating fashion inside the housing 529. I'm going to slap a 524 backing plate on there and retain it with a 523 ring. Now, one of the things I'll show you with these, similar to what we saw in the forward clutch. So we're always going to redo our composites, our frictions. When we take a look at these four, they really don't look like there's any damage. It's not like they're, smoked like the previous ones. At least eyeballing it, you wouldn't know. If we take a look at this one backing plate, we can see there's a scoring mark in here. You can see that in the picture, but you can feel it with your fingernail. It's deeply gouged in some places. So this makes this ring unreusable. This particular steel, rather. And, normally I would have reused these. So I had three that were fine, and then we had this one. And like I said in one of the earlier segments, I normally reuse the steels if there's no damage. But if there's damage on even one, I replace them all. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be slapping four brand new AC Delco 2420 4283 steels in there because of this problem. And then our frictions we'll get from our rebuild kit are going to be an 868 2802, and there's four of those in here for us. So pull those out and mark that we've consumed that. All right, so we're going to end up starting with a steel, then alternating with frictions, and then we're going to end up with a friction on top. Go ahead and get these opened up. So I don't need to, you guys need to burn up camera time with me opening these, and we'll come back after everything's unpackaged and ready to go. All right, so it's a little bit too large, like I said. Just going to rotate it through and get the drips off. And we're going to line this up with this little notch guy sitting right there. I'm going to come in and do the same thing with the friction. And it's real easy to tell that you've got it properly dipped because of the coloring. Because once you get it properly colored, you won't see this kind of light tan color anymore. And the steels, you know, it's not really necessary to do what I'm doing here, but it'll just help having ATF on here for anything we might miss on one of the composite plates. So as soon as we get this done, we'll put the backing plate. So I'll bring you guys back when we get to the last one. All right, last one. Now we're going to reach in and get our 524 backing plate. So this guy can only go in here. He's going to go in here. Yeah, because there's a angled cut, right? So he can only fit right there. And then this guy will fit on this side. There we go. And you want to have the flat side facing the friction material, of course. Then we got our 523 retaining ring that we're going to be replacing with an AC Delco 2420 6571. Some kind of a vacuum sealed package for some reason. Ready to go in the microwave. All right. At this point, just want to take this guy out for a second. I want to make sure that there's no debris on here. I thought I saw something, and I did. Okay. Now, we're just going to work this guy around on the outer perimeter. I'll trust getting my finger pinched in there. And there we go. She is in position. Now, I don't like how it's right on the edge there, so I'm actually going to redo this. Move it over a little bit more. Too far. Just don't want to have a chance of it, you know, working out of that edge that it was on there. And we're trying to get it where there's enough room to actually put it in. There we go. There we go. Now, so it's got a lot more distance on it. All right, so the last thing we've got on this guy here is a travel check. So they want us to take our feeler gauge, and they want us to come in between the backing plate and the retaining ring, and we want to look for what we've got here. I'm going to be aiming between 40 thousandths and 0.1 100 thousandths. So we'll start off with the minimum of 40, and we'll keep working our way up. So I'm going to grab a 10 and a 30, and then we'll just keep walking up, see where we end up. And I'll bring you guys back when we finally get done with this. But the technique, so they're showing a technique coming in from the inside. That's kind of hard to do, right? Because this is in your way. I'm actually going to come in from the outside like this, right? And we're just going to be doing a measurement like that to see what our clearance is. So it's definitely more than 40. We're just going to keep walking it up. Next one I can put on here would be 59. 59's still fitting in, although it's kind of snug. So this is definitely going to be in spec, right? We're not going to have to go much higher than that. Let's see if we throw, I don't know, let's just randomly see if we can knock out a 20 on here. This is probably going to be too far. Yeah, that won't fit. That's too much. So we're in spec. We'll fish around and see what it actually is, and I'll bring you back when I figure out the exact number. All right, our final number ended up being 56. And you want to grab it not in the middle because the ring can flex, but near one of the side pieces like I'm doing here. So it ended up being 30, 16, and 10, or 56 thousandths, which is well within specification. All right, so that's done. Now something else we can do, and I might go rig that up to do, is you can put some air in here and you can air check this guy. And I might do that before we put him in, and if I do, I'll show it to you. But the very next thing is actually installing it. Now, to make it easier to go in, they tell you to just undo part of what we did here. So they tell you to remove the backing plate retaining ring, 523, that we just put in, remove the backing plate, and remove the clutch plate stack, right? So take out the whole stack of frictions and steels, then put it into the case, right? And then they come over in here and talk about installing a new bolt, putting the transmission up in the horizontal position, and torquing that new fourth clutch housing bolt to between 17 and 19 foot-pounds. So at that point, we would be in a position then to reinstall everything. Now, the reason they tell you to do this is it eases assembly of the overrun clutch housing assembly going into here. So we're going to want to put that in here. So what you've got is the same kind of problem with the teeth on these frictions, right? Having to get all lined up in order for the other piece to fit inside. And so what they're suggesting, very similar to what we did on the forward clutch, where we actually took the piece off, we put it in, the hub in, and then we built the clutch around it. They're suggesting a similar approach here will make it easier when we get to the next step. All right, there's just one more clutch left, and that's the overrun clutch. So let's move on to that. All right, guys, let's go ahead and do the air test on this fourth clutch assembly, right? So this is the hole where the bolt would go in. We're just going to air test it before putting it inside the trans. We're going to put our air tool here. Again, we're using 40 psi, and then what we're going to be looking for is operation of this clutch. So to see what's going on here, you can watch right there. So she doesn't move much, but that's enough to know that she's going. All right, so I'm satisfied that we are done with this, and the other thing we're going to do is we're going to call it for part 3 here, guys. It's getting kind of long again. We'll pick it up again in part 4. If you found this interesting or entertaining, or you learned something, or it helped you, pay it forward and hit that like button. I'd really appreciate it. And as always, thanks for watching.